I have done almost 2,000 interviews on my program with all different types of healers who provide a multisensory and non-Western pedagogy in their practices. Their stories help to complete that circle of artistic authenticity which we all strive for. The cats I interview have been making a living on the bandstand for the last half century. They have dealt with good leadership and bad. They have come to different understandings of what love is. They have overcome a lot of adversity in their lives, and they are adept at playing all musics. For me nowadays, labels and names have really gotten in the way of our ability to create communal spiritual music. The bean counters want to pigeonhole and brand music. The cats have had an impact on so many records that my generation and older generations have lived off for years. They play little parts and serve the song as conduits for information from the heavens. For the most part, the cats had a chance to play with the original masters of the music and learn to get out of their own way to become part of the musical conversation. Thankfully, when the record business was actually an industry, these artists had the opportunity to gain name recognition through their work as accompanists and leaders by weaving in and out of different musical settings. One thing I've realized and been humbled by is the opportunity that has been given to me to gain knowledge and wisdom from the musicians, whose tales I share with people in all parts of the world via the internet. Call it mass distance education, if you will. I have the opportunity to talk with individuals who have been on this earth longer than myself, who have experienced societal shifts, and have invented and reinvented themselves in different musical settings in different parts of the country. As a rogue journalist, I'm searching for that fine line of connection from mind to body to soul. That's where the spirit emerges and what my whole show is about: how to create spiritual music. Bobby Bridger, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, it's hearing that, it's a pleasure to be here.
Hey, man.
I sincerely mean that.
I dig. No, thank you, brother. I just want you to talk about that, man. Whether in the studio or on the bandstand, over time, when did it become clear to you how to create spiritual music?
Well, I think I came at it from that perspective from the start. I grew up in what is kind of commonly referred to as the great folk music scare of the early 60s, late 50s and early 60s. And during that time, it was extremely important to be authentic and to have some sort of ethic about what you were doing, it was folk music in those days was often called message music, Uh, it was largely because of Pete Seeger and being blacklisted and all that, and that came out of the communist fears of the Second World War. And anyway, so I think that had a lot to do with a lot of people during the folk music, in particular during the folk rock merger back in the mid 60s that Dylan orchestrated, had a spiritual impact.
What specifically, can you talk about a message that resonated with you in your own message? I mean, everybody was bringing, it was more, I mean, clearly Seeger, blacklisted,
Mm-hmm.
the McCarthyism, all that stuff. But what was a Bobby Bridger message that resonated with you early on in your career?
I felt like we had felt a truckload of horse shit.
which is probably true. I wasn't around, but yeah.
As in the mythology was all skewed. And once I started digging into history, actual history, I saw how skewed it really was. And that sharpened my edge for wanting to tell a story about the false concept of manifest destiny and look behind what that really was masking. And that's what spawned uh, a spiritual thrust in my music, I think. But that didn't emerge until I had already had a very successful, uh, for me, pop country career in Nashville, and was that career was also touched by a spiritual motivation, but it was much more of a uh, artistic purity than it was of any kind of uh, spiritual music with. Uh, it was more like uh, secular hymns.
Yes. Yeah, I did. I did. No, I just want to go back for a minute though. Like, would you say that? Can you just go a little bit deeper on authenticity? Did that mean writing original music? Did it mean specifically speaking out against the whitewash version of history? Was it just about being yourself and not even having to sound or not using any kind of you know have your own tuning? Or what is authenticity to Bobby Bridger in that late 50s, early 60s time?
Well, and I'll give you a perfect example of it, I think. My second single for Monument Records
Right.
in late 1967. Uh, my producer was Fred Carter Jr., of course, the guy that taught Robbie Robertson how to play
Yeah,
guitar.
we're gonna get into him. Real, I love that cat
Oh,
so much, man.
yeah, he's the real deal, man. He
Yeah, yeah, man. I know.
really. Okay, anyway, I'm glad you know about Fred. I don't have to go into that. Anyway, he, I was picking songs, and he knew that I was so green that I had Rube painted on my forehead, and
We're all God's rubes, man.
he went he went the extra step and found a song that he felt summarized my how he saw me, and it was a song that Glenn Campbell wrote called "Less of Me." And it was almost like the golden rule in a message song that, and it was just wonderful. I loved that song. As a matter of fact, I even redid it on a 2016 album called Vagabond Heart. But it's a great Glenn Campbell song. But it has that. Let me be a little kinder. Let me be a little blinder to the faults of others. Let me praise a little more. Let me be a little whatever to I can't do that right off the cuff. I'll miss the rungs on the ladder and go crazy. But anyway, it was a great secular hymn, that song was.
Hmm.
And it was supposed to be it was the A side of the single. The B side was a song called Morgan City, which was a song about a woman who was uh, cuckolding three different guys who were working on an offshore rig in the Gulf of Mexico. And that song was the hit. That song came out of left field as a hit.
Yeah, that's more
So,
what our society gets off on than
yeah,
the be good to your brother kind of thing, you know?
yes, but
Yeah.
it was in that same kind of period where uh, come on, brother, shine on your brother.
Right. Right.
What the Youngblood song? And I can't think of the name of it right now.
I dig.
You dig it, I know it. Anyway, so that was part of that period, and yet it was commercial at the same time in that period. Everybody was trying to get together. That's the name of the song we were trying to think of.
I just want to.
Uh,
I want to. I just want to get something that's chronologically straight here. Uh, because it's cats like Fred Carter that I, you know, he's just one of the most unsung geniuses of all time. And
Amen, brother.
like I know when I interviewed Ronnie Hawkins, he took Doc Pomus, I think Fred Carter Jr. up to Toronto, and that was the original Hawks band. They got,
Yeah.
they had families. They got a little homesick, so they went back. And then, like later on, like Levon always had Fred Carter on his albums. But when
Hmm.
did you, when did you first? Did you go to Nashville in the mid '60s? I'm trying to figure out how you connected with Fred.
Well, I'll fill in the blanks. I'll connect the
Please.
dots for you there.
Yep.
And it I think will complete some of this your first question. I didn't mean to be vague. It's
No,
just
no,
hard to
this is
kind of
all
talk about it.
These are all concentric circles, so don't even sweat it.
When I went to college, I the not I it was in the time right before John Kennedy was assassinated, in that 2 month period before Kennedy was assassinated. The first thing I did was enter the freshman talent show, and I won it, uh, playing Four Strong Winds or something like that, 500 miles or whatever was popular during the day. About 3 or 4 days later, I auditioned for a local television show. And in those days, everything was live on television. Pardon me.
Where was college, by
And
the way?
this was in Monroe, Louisiana. I was from a tiny little town called Columbia, 30 miles south of Monroe, and Fred was from a little town called Winsboro.
So it was called
About
Monroe College.
no, it was Northeast Louisiana State
Oh my
College.
God, that is so classic. Go ahead.
Okay, Fred was from Winsboro, which is about 30 miles east of Monroe. Now, the Hawkins cousins, Dale and Ronnie, they were from Arkansas, but they had cousins in Mangum and all over that part of the country and so forth. So it was all intertwined, and everybody knew who Puddler Harris, all those people were in the music business. I wrote about this extensively in my autobiography because I felt like no one had given these people credit that came
No,
out of
you
the
absolutely not. Absolutely.
Louisiana hayride. Half of them created the wrecking crew in L.A. and Fred introduced the Telecaster to Nashville, and also was the finger picking genius that brought half those folkies from New York to Nashville.
Gee, are
So
you kidding me, dude? Holy
no,
cow, you're okay. I don't want to go. So Northeast Louisiana, you get up, do a talent show, continue.
okay, I went a spot. I didn't even have a car. I rode my bike the 2 miles out to the television station
Yeah.
with my guitar on the handlebars of the damn thing. I won a spot uh, on the on the show. It was a 15-minute live show. In those days, there were 3 television stations. Uh, ABC, CBS, and NBC. Everybody watched Walter Cronkite,
Right.
and I was on the CBS affiliate 15 minutes before Walter Cronkite came on. And so I was a regular on that show for 2 years while I was in art school studying painting and sculpture. Okay. So that may open up a little bit more about my spirituality right there. Anyway, Fred's mother, that was the point when Fred was leaving the Hawks, working with Conway. You probably know his background. He was
No,
working
I
with
mean, this
Roy.
is we might spend this entire first interview on this erogenous time in music. So
Yeah,
I just want to be clear. I want to be just the talent show was being televised, and it was
yeah,
15.
no. They got the two mixed up. Those were two pivot points in my life, absolutely separate entities. I won the talent show, which let me know I could do something in folk music.
I dig.
And then it gave me the confidence to go audition for this television show, and I won a spot. I was a regular on the show every Wednesday and Friday for 2 years.
Now, was it based out of New York or
No, it
Nashville?
was. This was all a local show out of Monroe, Louisiana,
Unbelievable. And you're
on KNOE, Louisiana. Uh, Jimmy No owned the station,
yeah,
former
but the
lieutenant
point is
governor.
the point is
Yeah,
that show was broadcast to a national audience.
no, it wasn't a national audience. It was all over southern Arkansas, western Mississippi and northeast Louisiana,
And it was
right
15.
there.
That was 15 minutes before
Before the Walter
Cronkite.
Cronkite
Got
show.
it.
That
Got it.
was their audience. So
Unbelievable.
I had an audience in that region, the bedrock of North American music.
Dude, I'm telling you, I want you to. This is all I want. Okay, so
Okay, I was on that show.
Fred was coming back down to where was
So
Twitty?
he was working with Conway, and he was working with Roy Orbison, and he was already smelling the paradise as a studio musician in Nashville.
I did.
And he was, in those days, he was signed to Monument as a triple threat, and Willie Nelson was a quirky songwriter. Fred was a songwriter, singer, guitar picking genius.
Had you I just want one more question. Had you met Fred prior to at Northeast Louisiana? You'd never met.
No, I was still a serious mud pucky.
Right, you had the rube on your forehead. Yeah, I get it.
No, but I was studying abstract expressionism and sculpture and
which is totally hip. But yeah, I get it. Yeah.
I was up to my elbows in mud on the potter's wheel most of the day. Okay, but Fred's mother, Tilly, was a fan of mine on the Monroe television show, the local television show, before the CBS News.
Oh my God.
And she kept telling Fred that he needed to sign this kid from Northeast Louisiana, and his neighbor in his backyard, my dad and Fred Sr. were bosom buddies, hunting buddies. And so Fred came home. I'd had a fight with my father about hunting. I didn't want to hunt, and my dad wanted me to be a hunter. And I was patching up with my dad, and I went home for Thanksgiving from college. And Fred was down from Nashville hunting deer with my dad at my dad's deer camp. And I came in off a stand, just a deer stand, as they call them. And there was Fred and his dad and his brother, and they were stripping out a deer they had killed. And Fred called me over and said, "My mother Tilly's telling me I need to get you to Nashville to make a record." And he said, "Do you want to come to Nashville and make a record?" And I said, "Yeah." And I was already popular from the television show, and I'd been offered a bunch of contracts, and my dad would never let me sign them. I was underage.
Wow.
And
I just want to tell you something. This is already this is one of the greatest stories I've ever heard in my 12 years doing this show.
Oh, wow.
So I just want to be clear. Did you know Fred Carter's father, or they had hunting buddies, and you didn't even ever ask who they were?
Yeah, I knew they were friends and so forth. I didn't know who they were, but I just knew that Fred was some big wig in Nashville.
Right. And then you happen to come home, patching things up, and he's
I was into folk music. Nashville didn't interest me. I was totally into folk music. If I was playing music, and I was already doing research into my epic ballads, my Western epic ballads. I was deep into history books. I was already. I could have written a scholarly book on folk music at that time.
What was your impressions of that early Nashville country music? Why was it? Were you really just not hip to it, or did it really not appeal to you?
I really was not hip to it at all. I was not hip to what was going on. Fred, as a matter of fact, I'll continue the story.
Go ahead.
I went straight back to college and didn't think twice about it. I talked for several days. I told everybody I'd met Simon and Garfunkel's guitar player, and they all thought I was pulling their leg and wouldn't pay any attention to it. And so I just forgot all about it and went back to the potter's wheel. And then in June, that was Thanksgiving, and in June I got a call one Saturday morning from Fred. My dad called me into his office and said, "Fred Jr.'s on the phone and wants to talk with you." And I got on the phone. He said, "I thought you wanted to make a record." And I said, "Oh, I do. I'd love to make a record more than anything." "I thought you were joking." And he said, "No, I'm as serious as a heart attack. I'm making so much money doing sessions. I'm worried about kidnappers." He said, he
I
said,
want to be
when,
very clear. You said he was a triple threat. He was a Studio Shark player. He could,
yeah,
but he was also an A&R guy. He was recruiting
he,
talent. He had
he was the former head of A&R Records in Nashville for,
Monument.
what was it? ABC Paramount.
Get out. Are
He,
you
he
serious?
resigned because they would not sign Jesse Youngblood of with that Get Together song.
Oh, Jesse Colin Young.
Jesse Colin Young. You need to
Wow.
look that part of Fred's history up.
Dude,
He
that is
was.
so bad. So he had no matter what, he had a lot of pull in,
I'll
he,
fill you. I can fill
yeah.
you in on a lot of stuff as we go
Go ahead.
along in the
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
Uh, uh,
But
he.
he was like, he's like, I'm drowning in money. I thought you were serious. Where are you?
Oh, he was joking about all of it. He
I'm
wasn't
kidding.
drowning
I'm
in
kidding.
money,
I'm
but he
kidding.
was.
Yeah, I did.
He was. He. Yeah, that was Fred's way of. You know. Uh, there's so many. There's so many people we have. They're bringing us traps and telling us to put them on their feet. You know. The mountain men would say.
Oh, I love it.
Anyway,
I love it.
anyway, uh, I went to Nashville, and we set out on the back porch of his house in Nashville. And he said, "Which direction do you think we ought to take? Pop or country or whatever?" And I said, I honestly don't know, Fred. You're the producer, man, you know." And he said, "I think we should try to go country first, but we'll get some kind of different flavor. You're more into folk music." And I said, "Well, I have one thing I'd like to ask." On the way up, I had driven up, I had driven through Tupelo to pay homage to Elvis,
Right.
uh, because I was going to make my first record. And man, I was a serious Elvis freak when I was a kid, teenager.
Yeah, I did.
So I spent the night in Tupelo, and then I was driving up through that part of Tennessee, that central south part, and I heard something come over the radio that I had to pull over on the side of the road. It sounded like, I wrote about this in my book too. It sounded like somebody had learned to play gossamer spider webs.
Mm.
I was enchanted, and I prayed for the announcer to say who it was. And he said it was "Gentle on My Mind" by John Hartford, not by Glenn Campbell, by John Hartford.
Hartford.
And it cast a spell over me. And I spent the whole way driving to Nashville trying to find that song on the radio again, and I couldn't. And so this was 2 days later, and I said to Fred, I said, "I heard this sound on the way up here. This guy's name is John Hartford."
Yeah.
I said, and Fred just paused, interrupted me, and said, with great reverence, said, "Ah, oh, gentle on my mind." And his eyes rolled up as if to heaven. And he said,
Wow.
I said, "Could you get him to play on my record?" And he said, "I know him. I'll call him." And 2 days later, John Hartford was playing on my first record.
All right, I want to be
And
clear. This is so Hartford was camped out in Nashville.
Hartford was where he was recording in Nashville. He lived
Well,
in
so
Nashville at
what's
that
so
time.
amazing is that what was that? What year is this? 67?
67. This is
Okay.
July of
What's
1967.
incredible is that not only put you in a trance, but then it led to people like Gary Burton, the vibes player, to go down
Mm-hmm.
to and make. I mean, he made a jazz album, but there's no doubt that it was the same kind of thing. Um, that was really Nashville was a hotbed of incredible activity. Gentle on My Mind, John Hartford,
Oh,
and
it just it.
so Hartford comes in the studio. So then, what did you actually? You took Fred's advice and were like, all right, let's go in a little bit more of a country direction.
Well, yeah, we cut a song called "I Don't Have Sense Enough to Come In Out of the Pain." Do you think that's country?
I mean, that's the longest title I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah. Well, we had Lloyd Green on steel.
Oh,
We
come
had
on, dude. Come on.
Wayne
Ah.
Moss on lead acoustic, Hartford on dobro banjo, Willie Ackerman on drums, and Junior Husky on bass, and Pig
Wow.
Hargis on piano.
Oh, Pig, are you kidding me, dude?
Scotty
This is unreal.
Al Pachuki was the engineer, Elvis's engineer, and we were in Studio B in Nashville. And Scotty Moore was Al Pachuki's associate engineer on the date.
And just to be clear, Scott Moore was playing upright bass.
Scotty Moore. No,
Scotty
no,
Moore.
no. Scotty Moore, Elvis's guitar player, was Pachuki's associate engineer
Yeah,
on the date.
that's right. That's right. Bill Black played upright. That is so.
Yeah,
Scotty.
No. Junior Husky played bass on my date, but Bill
I know.
Black
I know. But I want to be clear. Scotty Moore.
Yeah.
Scotty Moore was also a musician as well.
Yeah, and Fred was just the producer on this. He
Can
wanted
you talk?
to sit at the console.
This is really important for younger cats. I want you to talk. I want you to just. I know you had your own aesthetic. You were pretty avant-garde in a lot of different ways. Can you talk about the idea and the magic of, if this in fact happened, where everybody gets in the studio at the same time and hits live? I have to believe that you probably got one or two takes and you were done with each tune.
No, I was so awestruck by Scotty Moore and Al Pachuki and John Hartford that it took me 25 takes of "I Don't Have Sense Enough to Come In Out of the Pain" to get a cut on it.
You know what? I appreciate you saying that, man. I dig that. So that was that. But
Fred came out to the studio booth. Another guy you may know, Johnny Duncan.
I don't know that name. I don't know that.
He was a country singer. He was out in the studio trying to give me confidence and shake me and get me out of the starstruck mode. But Fred came out and said, "Bobby, how are you going to ever get to be governor of Louisiana if you can't sing this song?" It absolutely cracked me up.
No, you know what it is? Can you talk about
the next take? I got it.
So, was it just a matter of would it have been possible to just lay down the rhythm tracks and then have you overdub the vocals?
Oh yeah, that's what they normally would have done, but Fred never did it that way with me.
I love it.
I'll tell you, I was overstimulated. I was absolutely, totally like a deer in the headlights.
I did.
To complicate matters, in those days in Nashville, the console, you get this, the console was on one side. There was another glass window over on the other side where tourists came in and sat in a little room and watched the stars record.
Oh, cow.
Okay.
Wait, they had to pay? Did they have to pay to do that, or was that free?
No, they brought him in on the tour buses from outside. They'd stop the bus and bring them in off the bus, and it was part of their package. They'd see them in the studio in the day.
No, I dig. It's fantastic, man.
And then go to the Opry at night. And
yeah, but
so you know, Colonel Tom was fit right in right there. I'll tell you.
It just added to the overstimulation for Bridger at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll put it this way. In the next 3 years, I went to Nashville probably when I was on a real roll, I went 5 times a year for the next 3 years. And I would stay for sometimes 3 weeks at a time. And during that 3 weeks, Fred would probably have 15 sessions a week that he was playing. And I would go from session to session with him doing these head sessions that you're so reverently describing, and I so genuflect to.
I love this, man. No, you're really hitting the sweet spot right now. I want you to talk. This is I don't really care that it took you 25 takes. Why?
Okay.
Even though it worked out the way it did, why was Fred unscrupulous about having everybody hit at the same time?
He knew that I have to set modesty aside to describe this to
Yep.
you. Fred knew that I had a voice that was capable of going to the real big time, big time. And he, for example, he said after that first session, he said, the next session we're going to do strings. And he said, furthermore, you're going to sing with the strings.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that is so. Wait, so he's talking about the next record you would do strings.
Yes, and he's going to throw me in the water, and I'm going to drown or I'm going to swim.
How you going to be mayor? How you going to be governor of Louisiana, man?
That was the way Fred did things.
But as far as like the visceral, like I just would love you to talk. I don't care about your session per se, but just the idea of that aesthetic.
That aesthetic was so. I was so hooked on that aesthetic. I cannot tell you. I'll tell you. I can tell you another story about that, and I can give you the background, more background on Fred and that little triumphant that he had with Nashville. You know the name Bob Montgomery, I'm sure.
Yes.
Okay. You know the name Kelso Hurston?
I don't know that name.
Kelso was the head of Capitol Records in Nashville for a long time. He was a star maker for a lot of big country names during Sonny James and all those kind of people.
Sure.
In that era, or 60s through the early 70s. He was a great rhythm guitar player. He made his name writing a lot of hits, Brenda Lee hits.
Okay.
He was a great rhythm session player and a great friend of Fred's. Kelso and Bob and Fred had a secret partnership. Bob was the head of Liberty Records in Nashville. Kelso was the head of Capitol, and for a brief period, Fred was the head of ABC Paramount. And what they would do is they would take a young artist like a young Bobby Bridger and work him like through the minor leagues up to the majors. And hence I went to Monument first.
I love that. Dude, this is so classic. So that's sort of the single A level. That's a minor league level.
That's right.
Right.
And Fred Foster had an ear for young talent. He had resurrected Roy Orbison. He had discovered Christopherson, Chris Gantry, Dolly Parton, all kinds of people. And so he placed me with Monument very lovingly, Fred did. Fred knew he had to look out for me because his mother, his mother had talked him into signing me. You know?
Well, this is so far beyond, but it's so true. I mean, she only saw you, so you would play on this talent show quite often, or she saw you that one time?
No, she saw me on the television show. I was a regular, like on this was like the Andy Williams show of Monroe, Louisiana. It was a little talk show gardening. They talk about a gardener, a woman that did makeup, a barber, whatever, came in and play. And I would do a song in between the interviews that they did with everybody who had something going in Monroe or West Monroe.
Well, but I mean, Fred's mom, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. She obviously knew exactly what she was hearing.
Oh, she was Dina always has reminded me of Tilly Carter. Dina, Fred's daughter. She even looks like Tilly.
That's beautiful, man. So anyway, I mean,
I saw those sessions. I saw those sessions with the cream of the crop. Fred was working with the best in the business.
Let's just break it down. Was it David Briggs, Norbert Putnam,
those guys? Even prior to them, Ray Eddington, Junior Husky, Bob Moore,
Oh
Bob Moore
man,
has played on more sessions literally than anybody ever in the recording business.
was he playing upright? What was Bob Moore playing?
He played upright, electric, anything you wanted to play.
Oh
He could
my
do it
God, dude!
all.
So he was you would say that he was like the equivalent of I'm trying to think of a good guy.
Hal Blaine, or
Yeah,
Joe
like that
Osborne on
time
the
period.
West
Yeah, I
Coast.
did. No, I did. Because the guy, yeah, same kind of generation. Really, that
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
original Wrecking Crew
But
was, yeah.
but preceded Joe in Nashville, because he was back there with Harold Bradley and uh, what's the other Bradley brother, and Ferlin Husky and Brenda Lee and Chet Atkins, A Team, the original A Team in Nashville.
Was
Floyd Kramer, Floyd Kramer.
Wayne Moss in there?
Wayne, of course, came in through Barefoot Jerry, and he was immortal after
Right,
Pretty
right,
Woman. After Pretty Woman,
right, and then Lloyd Green as well, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
both those guys came in through that, and Kenny Buttry as well, the
And
drummer.
what about that cat Weldon Myrick?
Oh yeah, yeah, he's the steel player.
Steel, yeah.
All those guys were working with Fred, sometimes 4 sessions a day. So
That was the original Wrecking Crew of Nashville.
Yes, that's right.
Unbelievable.
These were the Nashville Cats, and when I was privy to go, they teased me and teased Fred that Fred was the only one of them who had a roadie when I was in town, because I would load and unload the guitars out of the back of the Cadillac.
And you were just
And
fine with that. Yeah, I love it.
oh, I was a pig in shit, man. And watching those sessions, and what I was going to tell you,
Yeah.
To perfectly tell you that story, was one Sunday night I was in Nashville, and Bob Montgomery shows up, and he's just beaming from ear to ear. He's so proud of himself. He does it, and he's jumping up and down and dancing and coming in. I've got a hit. We're going to be so rich. Put it on, put it on. So Fred gets the reel to reel, and uh, Bob plays the demo of Honey.
Oh, wow, wow.
And
Wow.
said, we're cutting it tomorrow. You're on the date with Goldsboro. Goldsboro comes in. I think they took 3 takes, and I don't remember who was on the date, but everybody there just went, "Oh man, we're going to hear this on the radio before we get to the car," you know.
Incredible.
And
Incredible.
that was where Bob launched big time. I mean, huge, big time. That's where he became bigwig at Columbia. Uh, 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 what's the big publishing company? Purley Cutman and Putman and all of them. Tree. He became the head of
Was
Tree
it
Music.
Big Tree Records or something?
No, Tree Music.
Tree Music.
Yeah, they were huge off of Greengrass at Home and Elusive Dreams, all those Curly Putman hits, just one after another. They were the gorilla, 800-pound gorilla in Nashville for years. And Bob ended up running that company and was the head of A&R at Columbia in Nashville. At that point, after that, Fred said to Bob, "We got one more shot with Monument. Get Bobby a song." And Bob had me over. I'd already cut some of Bob's songs on my first recording session. That same session I had so much trouble with. Before we ended, I became a 1 to 5 hit wonder at that point. After 25, I knew once I learned what was going on and relaxed.
Right. You settled in. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
But I cut a Bob Montgomery song called 3 Squares and a Place to Lay Your Head. But Bob, about 4 or 5 days after Honey, Bob taught me a song of his called Over You. And of course, he had written Misty Blue as well, which was a smash. And this was almost in that same genre. And man, I thought this was a smash. And Bob Moore played bass on it and helped Fred with the arrangement in the studio. And I think Pig played piano. I can't remember who else was on that date. Maybe I think Fred played guitar on that record. Anyway, oh, I loved that song. It was a great song. But the B-side was a song that Chris Gantry, who had just written, he was at the time had a smash with Dreams of the Everyday Housewife.
Wow.
And I had a hold on a song that he had written because we were both on Monument and I knew his work and I admired he had a song called Sundown Mary that I just really admired, but I was goo-goo over a song he had written called Net of Fireflies. And we cut that song for the B-side of Over You. And Fred made me do it live with a 16-piece orchestra. And that was more again, but that all happened right in the same period. And at that point, I was ready for the majors. He would do things. He came back from, the drum explosion on Bridge Over Troubled Water and on the
Yes.
Boxer.
Yes.
The people that get credit for that are Artie and Hal Blaine with the drum. But I know, I would bet I'd bet a lot that Fred Carter was the brains behind that drum explosion on that record.
And the only reason we can't confirm that is because Fred passed away before we were able to really figure that out.
Yeah, but yeah. Fred had the only EMT plates, German EMT echo plates in Nashville at the time.
Got it.
Fred had a marble echo chamber that he had built. He was obsessed with echo.
Oh my God, this man is out. Hold on, I just want to stop you right there. The 16, the Net of Fireflies with the string orchestra. Mm-hmm. That was 68.
A 16-piece orchestra that Don Tweedy conducted, and this was 1968.
And you were still sort of in the
I was still on Monument. I was on Monument,
but you were starting.
Fred had bought Nugget and was just about to move me to Nugget. And Fred Foster had wanted me to sign with Monument again, but he wanted to produce me and cut Fred out of the deal. And I said, no, I'm going with I'm going to dance with the guy that brung me. And
you break exactly, dude.
And
exactly.
He had bought Nugget, and that's where he had the EMT plates, and that's when Simon and Garfunkel were hot on him that's when they were recording Bridge Over Troubled Water. It was 68, 69, totally. In there. And he came back from one of those sessions, and I'm going to tell you more about him. He said, have you ever noticed, Bobby, that we fished out at Center Hill Reservoir a lot all night out there a lot?
I know, dude. That's where all those cats would go out there. Man.
Yeah, they'd go out and fish there late all night.
Sure. And
he says, have you ever noticed that echo resonates more over water than when it's not near water? And I went, no, I never paid any attention to that in my life. Well, when I went back to Nashville, he had concocted a little trough of water, but like you would have a chicken feeder in a chicken coop.
Sure, yeah.
With metal in a wooden basin that he had tacked down, and this thing was about 6 to 8 feet long. And he took it to the studio and had me sing while he and Jess Yarian, his engineer, recorded me doing a demo, singing with a mic at one end of the trough and me at the other end of the trough.
You have to be kidding me.
How
This
he
is
got any echo out of that, I'll never know. I never heard the playback. He and Art Garfunkel kind of ripped the blanket over one thing at one point when Fred showed Artie that marble echo room, and I think Fred told me that Fred said, "Well, if it doesn't work, at least they can bury you in it, Fred." and and I don't. Fred was very serious about echo, and I just would bet that explosion came from him. They may have done it. They may have put. Artie may have told Hal Blaine to go get in the elevator shaft, but I'll bet it was Fred that suggested
right. The seed was planted by Fred Carter.
It was Fred who threw it into the echo chamber. The way they did that was a bass drum on the floor, boom, and then they double tracked it, so they had a second drum out of sync, boom, boom. The second drum hit. The second drum they threw into an echo chamber and just immersed it solid, and so it created an explosion. Boom.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
You
Yeah.
see.
And was that, by the way, I just want to be clear, was that done in New York or Los Angeles?
I don't know how they did that later. I
Okay.
think they did it in New York because Fred was still there. Fred was recorded with them in New York.
Sure.
I don't think Fred recorded with them in Los Angeles. So I would bet that I'm pretty sure that was done in New York. And see,
So,
I didn't meet them until the next, probably about 6 months later, maybe closer to a year later. They both came to Nashville to give Fred a gold record, and I went out to the airport with Fred and Harlan Howard and Chet Atkins in Fred's Cadillac to meet Paul and Peggy Harper, his first wife.
wow.
And so that after that, Fred had always said he was training me to produce my own records. I pushed Paul about how he got what he wanted, and he said he paid the price, and that meant mixing until you Artie and Roy Halley were convinced that he had turned Mrs. Robinson into a minor religion. He mixed it so many times.
Hold on, I just want to be clear. You came with the guy who brought you there on Nugget. What was the first project you did on Nugget?
One of the first projects I did was he had bought with Nugget a wealth of bluegrass masters.
Wow.
Because Lonzo and Oscar owned the studio and all the masters. They were famous, kind of a second tier bluegrass.
I love it, dude. This is sick.
And Fred pulled one of those old albums they made out and said, "You sing in that tenor key. Let's see what happens." And we pulled out the masters, put them on the recording machines, and started recording on another track, singing the songs over again, bluegrass, with me singing them, seeing what would happen.
Do you remember what's the name of that? What's the name of the album?
I couldn't possibly.
So it
recall.
was never released.
No, he was just playing. We did that often.
I want to go back for 1 second, because I mean, this is where the rubber meets the road. Like when I interviewed Carl Himmel, legend, he was talking about playing with Kwasi Gardner, and they'd be playing jazz. And like, I think can you just talk about Bob Moore, Chet Atkins? Those guys could all play. Fred Carter, those guys play jazz?
Well,
I'm talking like
Chet had that classic saying that when someone asked him, did he read music? And he said, yeah, but not enough to mess up my playing.
That's the greatest line in the world, dude. I mean, but what I'm talking about is like, I'm not saying that Dizzy Gillespie was coming down to Nashville to jam, play bebop with these guys, but could they play bebop?
They could play anything. Fred used to amaze me, and Dina will verify this if
Yes.
you ever talk with her.
I gotta talk
or
with her,
Ronnie, or
man.
any of his kids. He would come home from working 4 sessions in a day and wind down by watching cartoons on kiddie cartoons, Looney
Totally.
Tunes,
Yeah.
and playing along with the score to those zany cartoons on a gut string guitar.
Wow.
And I don't know if you've ever tried to follow one of those damn things, but
No, well, I mean the major New York, the major studio cats, from the original Wrecking Crew in Los Angeles, Emil Richards, he said the hardest music to play was that cartoon music. So I understand.
well, Fred would wind down with that. So that'll tell you more about what's going on.
He was winding down, dude.
And I was privy to all those sessions. I will never get over it. I will never reach a creative juncture again like that.
I love it. I freaking love it. Dude, you know what? You're blessed that
I've worked with the cream of the crop from Broadway, Dale Wasserman, that wrote Man of La Mancha, with one of the most brilliant men I've ever known. I've worked intensely with him in theater productions, creatively. I've worked with Max Evans, who was with Sam Peckinpah when he died. I on and on and on. I never met anyone as creatively tuned in as Fred and many of those other studio musicians in Nashville during those days. And I'm sure the same thing is true in Nashville. I cut in Nashville with the Wrecking Crew, with Hal Blaine and Joe Osborne when I was on RCA. I saw all of those guys in the studio. But I'm sure there are other people who worked with the same people too. But I will never get over doing head sessions with those studio musicians. They were the smartest cats.
I want to be very clear though. Let's go a little bit deeper on this, because I think going back to the Chet Atkins line, all these cats, on top of just being stone geniuses, they were all ear-trained musicians. Did any of them really read music?
Glenn Campbell never read music.
I mean, Chet Atkins never read music.
No, I think he may have never read music. I don't know.
Oh, he said not enough to screw up my playing. That's what he said.
Yeah. He was joking with you.
Right.
Chet was a big cut up like that, and you never knew. Well, let me go ahead and describe. I'm sure Fred would love for me to tell you this story. And
please.
I'm going to run out of voice at that point.
No, we're gonna do a couple different installments. This is just set
good.
one.
I'm loving talking.
No, we're cooking away, dude. You're making my day, man. You're making my day.
You're making my day because you're the only cat that I know who knows what I've been talking about.
Well,
for the last
honestly, man, like
years.
It's just the cats have. Listen, I'm not a big reader. It's you guys who have filled me with all of this wisdom and knowledge. So it's all my hat's off to you guys, man.
Well, I've been trying to express this to people. There is a thing going on in North Louisiana right now called the North Louisiana Music Trail.
Right.
Fred had the first highway marker honoring him. It was because an old art student of mine was going around out of his civic duty and love of people and cleaning up historical markers on the side of the road and recoloring them and all sorts of stuff.
I love this.
And when he told me he was doing that, I said, someone should do something like that for the musicians that have come out of that part of the world. And he said, that's a great idea. And he called me back in about 6 months and said, Fred's going to be the first one, and you're going to be the seventh one. They did Jimmy Davis, they did Webb Pierce, they did Tony Joe White,
Oh
they
my
did
God.
Ivory Joe Hunter,
Oh.
who wrote Since I Met Your Baby. They found the guy that wrote Louie Louie is a black guy from North Louisiana. The kids that made it popular were from Seattle, but the guy that wrote it was a black guy from North Louisiana.
Let me
They've
ask you a
done
question. I
all
want to
kinds.
just, this is really important. How, as best you can, how did that, and the same, there are these, how did a certain selection of seekers and geniuses wind up in that area? Does this go way back in the history of our country?
I don't. It's. I think it's also part of the fact that that's an area known for the blues.
Absolutely.
I mean, it is the blues has branded and marketed that brand very thoroughly.
You know, it's
But the
funny though.
side of
I
it,
just want to stop you. It's funny because at the pop level, for a 43-year-old like myself and younger, it's the Mississippi Delta blues. You never hear about Northern
yes.
Louisiana. It's always Mississippi, and that. But it's even more than that. It's Northern Louisiana.
Well, now you see what this North Louisiana Music Trail is trying to hook up with the Mississippi Blues Trail,
Yeah,
and also the Arkansas Rockabilly Trail, which is
totally.
now coming together. So what we're hitting around, but not hitting the nail on the head, is that there was a lot more going on there than just blues. That rockabilly thing that happened there with Elvis and with the Hawks and with everybody else in that Conway and all those guys
Oh my God.
was powerful shit, man.
No, I mean
You know,
it was, and it's really not been fully documented the way it should.
it has, when Elvis was playing guitar with Scotty and Bill, that's about as hip as it was ever gonna get, man. And they
Totally,
can
man.
they can mock Elvis all they want to, but Elvis was driving the rhythm of that shit, man.
Absolutely,
You
absolutely,
know,
dude. Otis. I mean, he was upset. Yeah, I mean that to me is absolutely. You know, there was the barnyard. They had something in which was similar to the Grand Ole Opry in Arkansas. I remember talking to Louis Shelton, the great studio shark, about, and he would see Jerry Lee Lewis on the top of freaking you know uh, hot dog stands.
mm-hmm,
Just it was just
mm-hmm.
it was that was in Arkansas. Ronnie obviously. Uh, that's still. I mean, rest in peace, Ronnie Hawkins. I mean, it's still remarkable to me that he took Fred Carter Jr., Doc Pomus, and those guys to Canada. It's really. I mean, he was
Mm-hmm.
on this one label, Roulette. He signed his life away, and then he wound up living up there the rest of his life. But I mean, and then for Fred's
Well,
mom, I mean, the whole thing is just. It sounds like a dream, really.
it is to me. I know at this point almost, but the story is that Conway told Ronnie to go to Canada because rockabilly was fading out, and that they still loved it up in Canada, and he could still get a few shekels up there if they took off up there.
Wait, before
And
we wrap, yeah, go ahead, continue, please.
but now let me punctuate this with something that as a folklorist, because I've done a lot of
Oh, I
woodshedding and
know,
this kind of
I
stuff,
understand, yeah.
that sheds light on this. Most of those guys in Nashville, when I hit town, Bob Montgomery, for example, Bob grew up, he was part of a group called Buddy and Bob. That was Buddy Holly and Bob Montgomery.
My God.
They were a songwriting duo in Lubbock. And then, of course, Buddy Holly hit big, and Bob rode his coattails straight to New York and as a writer primarily. And they all thought that rockabilly was, even Elvis. They thought this is this is maybe 2, 3 records, and it's going to fade out. We'll be driving trucks again. And so they had their eye on the industry, getting a couple of hits with a couple of silly little songs, and then becoming an A&R guy. And hence you get a Kelso Hurston who, writes 5 Brenda Lee hits, and then he's the head of Capitol Records.
Right.
Fred jumps straight out of picking and singing. He's the head of A&R at ABC Paramount. You see what I'm getting at?
It was a foundational, basically, it was a much more than just a fad.
Yes.
Yeah.
So everybody thought rockabilly was it was just gonna fade out as quick as your jeans, and so that's why I think that Ronnie took off to Canada. There's another story that I heard because they were on Roulette, which was a very famous mafia label as well. And I heard that while they were playing in Detroit, no, this is a story that I think is maybe an urban myth, that they got in sideways with the mafia don in Detroit because one of the guys, and no one knows who, seduced the daughter of one of the mafia heads. And he put a hit out on them. And Ronnie went to, I can't remember who that guy was that headed Roulette Records, and said, "Save us."
It was a Jewish mafia who
Jewish mafia guy.
The guy owned Birdland. I don't remember his name, but yeah, he absolutely.
Martin Levy. His last name was Levy.
That's right. Something. That's it. Yeah.
Morris Levy, and that he said, "Run across the border to Toronto and give me time to call this guy off." And that's how they liked it over there and stayed.
Well, no, I want to. I want to read this because this is my 5th book is coming out, and one of my interviews is with a guy that I'm not sure if you ever played with, Amos Garrett. He has the legendary
Snuff Garrett. Yeah.
No, not Snuff. Amos Garrett. Amos Garrett from Detroit. Not Snuff, but he said in this, he goes, "I'm an honorary Hawk. I knew Ronnie Hawkins from Toronto because I grew up with Levon and the guys. My favorite amalgamation of the group is Levon and the Hawks before they were the band. They were Ronnie's first all-Canadian band. He had about this is it. He had about 4 or 5 big hits in the States. He was a hillbilly from Arkansas. When he was about 18, he signed a record deal with Roulette whereby he couldn't make a dime, no matter how many records he sold. He was a teenager, good-looking hillbilly kid, so he came up to Southern Ontario. So it sounds to me like at the end of the day, he was like, because I mean, Elvis and those cats were making good bread, and Ronnie had signed his life away. So it worked out. It worked out okay.
Yeah, it certainly did, and music history will never be the same. But that's when Fred said, "I'm not going to Canada. I'm going to Nashville." He had been doing a lot of dates with Roy Orbison, a lot of the Dream Baby, and a lot during that period. As a matter of fact, he played on so many Orbison records, they couldn't remember for a while whether it was him or Wayne that did the Pretty Woman lick. There was a lot of discussion about who actually played that for a while.
Wow.
I love Wayne, and it's very clear that he did it, but. Anyway, before
we wrap up set 1 here with Bobby Bridger, I've been really, like I said, I know I just came out of left field when I sent that message to you. You're not the first person I've solicited to come on my show using new media. I feel like people can dog on social media, whatever you want to call it. If you don't, to me, it's one of the most brilliant things to ever come around, and I can only hope that over time, creatives, modern day Bobby Bridgers who are growing up now, can start to use it to produce content to drive consciousness and not to receive information and drown. That being said, I was digging through the country section of this record store in Boise, Idaho, and I picked out Merging of the Minds
Yeah,
and
merging of our minds, right?
merging of our minds. And I turned it over. I'm like, what is, I saw it was on RCA. I'm like,
Mhm.
Nashville Cat. Look over, I'm like, Carl Himmel's playing drums. Who is Bobby Bridger? And the next thing you know, I seek you out online, and there you are. And so I've been listening to that album, and it's great because all the lyrics are included. And I just kind of wanted you to talk about this one song, "Fompin' Around." Can you talk about "Fompin' Around"? I'm really enjoying that
Oh,
because it's like the same vibe. Even though I know, same vibe as like some of the, there's a Delbert McClinton, Glenn Clark album that's ridiculous from the same time period. There's Bobby Charles from that time period. It's the same kind of
uh-huh.
vibe on. So "Fompin' Around," take us through it, baby.
Well, it's so funny you bring that up after all this talk about studio cats
Yep,
because uh, Fred, as I said, Fred had Nugget, Nugget Studios and Nugget
absolutely.
label and all that. And I was due for a demo session. And I told Fred I did not want to work with all the regular cats because
Right.
this thing had become very it had become very
Formulaic.
formulated. And I said, surely there are a bunch of kids in town like me, my age, you know.
Right, right.
And he said, that makes a whole lot of sense. Let's see what I can do when you get to town. And so he got Carl and a bunch of the kids from Mother Earth that were playing with Mother Earth at the
Tracy
time.
Nelson,
Tracy
unbelievable.
Nelson.
Holy cow.
That's Carl and Andy McMahon and Powell St. John. All those guys came out for the session that day. All those were first takes.
Dude,
Everything
that
on.
is so freaking awesome. So he basically he took what you wanted. He found these younger, because there's a lot of cats on there. I don't, the names don't necessarily jump off the table. When I saw Himmel, and
Mhm.
then of course Fred Carter in legendary fashion playing, I think congas on it as well. I
Yes,
mean,
yes.
it
It
just was
was,
like, I'm like, this is a Jake Feinberg in the pocket album, and this is why it's so classic that not only do we connect, but this has been completely transcendent and really beautiful interview. So I can now go down and really dive in even deeper. I'm just saying that is a golden,
well,
that's gold right there.
well, I'll set the stage for you with bumping around. First of all, it was a song that was written. I was emptying my trash one day, and I was out dumping the trash, and there was a little kid playing around by himself, as kids will do. He was about 7 or 8 years old, singing and dancing and skipping, just happy with himself.
Having a ball, yeah.
And I said, "What are you doing out here at the trash cans?" And he said, "I'm just bumping around." I think he was trying to say stomping around because he was jumping up and down like in a mud puddle and he was bumping. I thought, what a great word.
Oh, my fomping around, baby.
And
I
I ran
freaking
back in and
love it.
I wrote that song in about 10 minutes, ran back in and I never thought anything of it until it was time to demo. And Fred had also, I had told Fred I didn't want any name players on this because I said if we get anything that works, I'll just pay a master's fee on the record and we'll put a record out.
Right.
So he calls me in the day before and I told him I did not want him to play on the record, and he was kind of chagrined and took a it took a back step, kind of pause.
Yeah, you weren't in the minor leagues anymore, though. You were calling the
No,
shots. Yep.
and he took a look at me and he said, "All right." He said, "I'll keep the coffee pot hot." And so he knew what was going on, that I was going to go after something different. He'd been pushing on me with stuff like the water trough and like that forever. And so right before the session, he called me and he said, "Pete Drake is here. He's just come back from England. He's been working with George Harrison on this monster 3 album
Right.
3-disc album thing. He said, he's available. Do you want me to book him? And I said, are you serious? And he said, yeah. And I said, God, let's book him.
Right.
So we booked Pete Drake. And Pete comes in, and you'll notice he's pretty predominant on that with that steel slide
Everywhere.
on that
Yeah.
song, you know.
Everywhere.
And we get in the studio, and all these kids, Carl and all of them included, were totally freaked out because they knew he'd been playing with George Harrison, you know. And so they were freaked. And Pete, after about 3 takes on one of the songs that didn't make that album, as a matter of fact, he says, pulls me aside and says, look, next run on this, I'm going to hit a clam, and you're going to call for, I'm going to call for a cigarette break, and you're going to take the break. And I said, okay, Mr. Drake. So he hit his clam, and I said, okay, let's take a break. And the two of us go outside and smoke a cigarette together, Pete and I. We come back in, and everybody's looking at both of us like totally different. He told me before we went back in, he says, that's going to calm everybody down. They're going to see I can hit the clam just like they can.
I love it. This is so classic.
He said, this is going to let all those boys ease up in there. And that session, then that was the first cut that the song that I pulled out next, and we did a first take, and boom, it was in the can.
Bumping Around. Bumping Around was the first take.
I went in.
I love. So he settled everybody down, hitting the clam.
Right.
Everybody was relaxed. You came back in, knocked out that song right away.
I went out to the office and said to Fred, hey, I'm over this now. Can you come in and play with us? And that started the one take, one cut, boom, boom, boom. We worked.
Dude, so you know, it was like, yo, you were like, let me bring in some unsung cats, and then you know, once it was all said and done, the masters helped you get over the finish line.
Pete and Fred came in and just we brought the thing home, and then we couldn't sell it. It took me 1.5 years to sell it, and nobody wanted it. And then Fred finally told me he said, can you pay for a 16-track dub? I said, yeah. And I spent the last of the money I had in any kind of budget with it for Fred to make a 16-track dub. And he sent it to Roy Halley out in San Francisco, Simon & Garfunkel's engineer guy, co-producer.
Sure.
And he mixed it. And that's the mix that
that's
RCA
the mix that
bought.
Came out on RCA. Whatever.
The RCA bought that mix, and the first thing they wanted to do was remix the fucking record.
Come on. Taking all the life out of it, man.
I said, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah, but that's like all ego stuff, man. That's like ego stuff. Man.
They said, you just signed a contract that everything has to be done in an RCA studio. We have to remix this with our engineers. I went, oh God, are you're kidding me. So I had to fly out to LA for probably 6 months on and off to remix the record before it came out. And Fred was furious over it because I had to sign my publishing to E.H. Morris to get the record deal. And I went to tell him in person that I had signed. He was thinking I was going to re-sign with him. And I went to tell him eye to eye that I had signed with E.H. Morris. And he got on the phone immediately and called the head of E.H. Morris and called him a thieving, pirating son of a bitch.
Well, but here's the thing. I first of all, kudos to you for being straight up with Fred, obviously. But no one was you couldn't find anybody to take the record for 2 years. I'm not sure what you were supposed to do.
No, it was going to die, and my career was
Exactly.
going to die.
Right.
So I had to do it, and it took. The reason I made the record "Healing the Wisdom," which is the most spiritual record I've ever made, and you should listen to that.
Well, I need to get my hands on that. I don't know how to get my hands on the
You
first
go to
Bridger
my
record.
YouTube. Go to my YouTube channel.
Okay. I got to dig into that because I'm really, you know what it is. Regardless of how many freaking remixes were done on the Minds record, it just sounds like you're having fun. And during that, that's it. I mean, it was fun. I mean, and the thing is this, I'll just leave you with this, Bobby Bridger. We wrap up set one. As you enter this new year, keep in mind, as you always do, that happiness is our divine right. So
Amen.
it is all about having a ball. And everything else after that is secondary, man. So I just want to tell you, thank you for blowing my mind. I will get this up later tonight, and we'll move on and do set 2 down the road real soon.
Call me as soon as you're ready, man. You're the dude who knows what I'm talking about.
Hey, man, I'm merely a conduit for this stuff. I'm not responsible for anything other than being a vessel for the information. So Mazel Tov, man.
Mazel Tov.
Be cool, Bobby. I'll talk to you soon.
I got to tell you about Leonard Marks in the next talk.
Oh no, we got more to do. Don't you worry.
Okay, my man.
All right, be cool, man. Later.
You too.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.